Hello everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp and to quite an exciting sponsored video because SEGA have sponsored us to take a look at the new Sonic Racing Crossworlds, which is a Nintendo Switch 1 release. We will have a look and see how it runs on Switch 2 as well, but give you everything you need to know about the game. Please do check out the links that are down in the description and the top pinned comment if you do want to have a look at it, because it shows them that SwitchUp was a good place to sponsor.
Yeah, do let us know if this is one you are looking forward to and what you think of the game once you've watched the video. Stick it all down in the comment section below. So what exactly is Sonic Racing Crossworlds? Well, let's find out.
Now, many of you may be looking back at things like Sonic Adventure and wondering if this one has a story campaign. It's not set up like that at all. It's more all focusing on the racing experience, the way it's set up in terms of the stages, and a few really interesting mechanics.
Yeah, the closest you'll get to a story really is the fact that for each race or each Grand Prix, you'll have a rival that is selected, and there will be some cutscenes in between races where they'll give you a bit of grief, a bit of banter. But yeah, in terms of a pure story, there's nothing like that.
So let's talk about the gameplay, and I think this is where it's receiving the most praise on all platforms, because it really feels like a return to form and a style that people really enjoy.
So each race will take on a familiar form in that you'll have the chance to speed off the starting line, albeit this isn't done through a specific timed button press. Here you have a rev count and you need to land on the green. You'll have items that you can pick up through mystery boxes and rings that you can collect as well. And obviously placing higher within Grand Prix mode will give you further points to try and win the Grand Prix overall.
Now, I do like the fact they've gone for a proper rev for the start of the races. It actually makes it feel like you're driving a vehicle, rather than that specific button timing that you may have in other games. The tracks themselves are covered in rings and boost pads, and it does have quite a heavy emphasis on the drift mechanic for drifting and getting boosts around corners.
Yeah, so you'll hold down a shoulder button in order to activate this, and you kind of steer into the turn to get the most out of it. There's different levels that you'll move up into to increase your boost once you let go. But it does serve more of a purpose than this, because the game has a number of different ways that you can travel. You'll go from being a kart into being a boat or even a plane at times. If you're on water, for example, in one of the boat sections and you use that boost, that drift, it will give you a proper speed boost where you can almost hop forwards past some of your opponents if you get the timing right.
Yeah, it was a good idea for them to do that. It makes each of those different terrains feel unique in terms of not only the way that they control, but also the gameplay. And you're hopping out of the water with that straight line boost can be really useful for picking up high items. As well as that, the drift mechanic is quite forgiving in that if you hit a wall, it doesn't actually end your drift, which is, I was quite surprised to see that.
Yeah, it's one of those where it doesn't feel as twitchy as it does in other similar kart games. You kind of almost snake along a little bit, but after that initial period of getting used to it, I actually found it really enjoyable. I felt you could use it very much to your advantage to really speed ahead of the opposition if you got it right.
So Glen mentioned the rival system. How does that actually work?
So similar to games like, I remember Outrun back in the day had a rival system where it would pick someone out that you would need to kind of focus on. And here, when playing through Grand Prix, there'll be the one that you're looking out for most, because generally whoever is picked as your rival will become the best racer and the one that will finish top if you don't stop them. Another interesting aspect, talking about points and the Grand Prix in general, is that the final race of a Grand Prix, so you have 4 races in total, you have 3 standard races, and then the 4th race is almost a combination of the 3 levels or tracks that you raced before, with each lap being based on one of those previous tracks. But the final race in a Grand Prix also grants you more points for finishing first. So if in a traditional kart racer you knew you couldn't win by that final race, it felt a bit pointless, here that extra boost in points could just make things interesting again.
But we haven't mentioned, I don't think, its biggest hook. Now, it uses travel rings that allow you to warp to different locations. So how that looks is, if you're in the first place position, you'll reach what essentially amounts to 2 different choices, and then heading through sends you and the rest of the pack into a completely different track, which is such a good idea.
It really is. You have 24 tracks within the game, but you have 15 crossworlds that you can transport to. Mark mentioned if you are winning the race, if you're in first place, what will happen in some of the tracks is that you'll have a point where you can choose which one to go to, with one being explicit and the other being like a mystery. But if you're not in first place, obviously the computer will decide for you and everybody else.
You've got a number of different accessibility options, things like steering assist, auto accelerate, and trick assist to make things easier. I did also notice an option on Switch to use the gyro to help with those tricks.
Yeah, those tricks will give you a boost, and you can do them once you're in the air, whether that's with the stick or, as Mark said, with the gyro controls. And another major feature of the game is that of the gadget system, or the gadget cards. So winning races will earn you tokens, and once you've unlocked the gadget system, you can implement this by purchasing these that will go on your card, and these basically give you perks that you can then use within race. It could be that your drift meter fills up quicker so that you can get to those higher levels. It could be that you can hold an extra item, anything like that, and it does help you to cater the experience to suit the type of racer that you are.
Yeah, there's a ton of customization as well. You've got vehicles split into different categories such as speed or power, and then using the tokens that Glen just mentioned, you can completely change the look of body parts and have it look exactly the way that you want it.
Another good use of the tokens is that you can use them to retry a race. So let's say that you fail on that final race of a Grand Prix and don't win, you could use some of those tokens to try again and try to get first place, which I thought was a nice feature.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one to highlight, because there's always that second chance, but it's a finite amount.
Absolutely, yeah. Once your tokens are gone, they're gone. So it gives you a chance to redeem yourself, shall we say, but not an infinite chance, which is nice. A final note before we move on to the visual section. In terms of game mode, you have the Grand Prix that obviously we've mentioned a few times, but you also have the race park, which is more challenge based, and you have your classic time trials, and you do have multiplayer, as you would expect, being 1 to 4 offline, 2 to 8 if you're using local wireless, or 2 to 12 if you are playing online.
When it comes to the performance, well, the game is running at 30 frames per second. That's probably the biggest change for the Switch edition, and that's the same at the moment whether you run the Switch 1 version on the Switch 1 or if you run it on the Switch 2. Yeah, we did notice a couple of minor drops. When it comes to things like resolution, the Switch 1 edition, it uses some form of dynamic resolution scaling, so you can see a difference there when you're comparing it to something like the Steam Deck, but the image and the overall artistic direction is still quite nice.
I think it's fair to say that it goes for the modern Sonic look more so than the classic Sonic, but I did really enjoy the difference in each of the tracks. You had a lot of your standard locations in terms of fire and ice, lava and what have you, but that cross-world mechanic, which meant things changed up mid-track, was really quite an interesting way to handle this. And also you had almost like set pieces where in one of the water-based levels you're trying to fly through a huge kraken, and its tentacles are everywhere and you have to fly through rings and try to avoid it. Again, just nice little moments like these.
Yeah, I completely agree. We did mention the Crossworlds in the gameplay, but I think you're right. The fact it keeps the visual fresh within a single race is such a clever idea.
It was also quite interesting having the final race of a Grand Prix comprised of the previous races. I don't think I've seen that before. And again, it just found a way of keeping one race feeling quite fresh, owing to the fact that the locations change so often.
The digital edition retails at £54.99 here in the UK, or your regional equivalents, and it is worth noting that this is a Switch 1 edition only at present until the Switch 2 version comes out, which I think is later in the year.
There is a physical version available for this Switch 1 edition.
So there we have it. Let us know in the comments. The game has obviously been receiving rave reviews on the internet, which is really nice for a title in this genre. Yeah, we've got links to it down in the description and the top pinned comment. Clicking those shows them that this was a good place to sponsor. Nice one.
Thanks again to SEGA for sponsoring this video, and thank you to all of you for watching. Thanks to our patrons and our channel members, of course. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.